5 minutes. Oh, there you go, Angela. There we go. Thank you. What's your general view on quantum computing as commercial use in terms of timeline? Great, great, great question. I mean, seriously. Our view is that we haven't got any clue about real events that will sort of make, let's say the launch of ChatGPT was the event where people thought, oh, LLM are actually useful, whatever. We don't have any clue. And to be fair, I don't even know if it's going to happen this decade. It's possible. It's not unlikely. It's not impossible. It's not for sure. What are we doing about that? Is that in a way quantum is already happening. There are some areas where you're starting to see some applications, even though they're not real use cases. And so what's important, in our opinion, is to try and find the intel back in the 60s when people didn't even know about mobile computers or if you look at the presentations from the early Intel founders and what computers were supposed to do, their success of personal computing was completely different from those scenarios. But they built a huge successful company because they were able to provide the semiconductors to that. I think that's where quantum is today. There are some companies that are laying down the infrastructure, and quantum is coming, and it's coming incrementally. We're going to start to see some real use cases this decade. But whether it's the full, quantum major breakthrough that everybody notices, I don't know. And I think it's just going to be important to maybe avoid companies, in our opinion, when you invest, companies that are entirely dependent on that event to happen. Where do you think you will add tech bio? Right, so we don't do drug development per se, just purely because we don't have tech bio experts. So we've done only one tech bio bet so far. It's actually the only software that we've invested in, and it's because it's a horizontal platform that uses a lot of algorithms to compute images, to enrich data, and all of that is used for cancer detection. You can then create devices out of the underlying platform. Why am I saying all of this? Because that was fairly not easy, but it was possible to understand with our knowledge, and it was possible to map into a market that doesn't depend on a drug being developed, a specific drug. This is just one example. To extrapolate broader, I think anything that is about the computation, even if it involves hardware, even if it involves labs, but as long as the creation of labs or the use of physical infrastructure, in fact, maybe we even prefer it, as long as it's not dependent on the pure biotech market, i.e. biotech funds and biotech customers buying the company as the commercial future, purely because we don't have the expertise in-house to assess that. And it's a bit of a different stream of growth and exits than even deep tech. Curious about the mechanism for contracts given to startups. Oh, yeah, good question. Is the US their pathway? So this is about dual use companies, how they get contracts, DoD funding, relationship build. Where do you go to look for the opportunities? The defense agencies across European countries will be interested in procurement, right? So Europe is obviously slower, and that includes the UK. Greenjets, to make a specific example, they have closed a couple of contracts and they have major LOIs for much bigger multi-million revenue in the US. And they have some in Europe, but they're smaller. That's quite astonishing considering it's a pre-seed company, right? So you have managed to close more stuff in the US than here. It's because the US is moving a lot faster. Everybody knows, and there are commercial entities, even within big organizations like Lockheed Martin, you've got people on the ground that actually talk to the CEOs of tiny startups, even from outside the US. Whether companies to continue to benefit from this will have to Delaware incorporate and flip. It's a different question, but specifically about the contracts, there is interest. The UK, for instance, and events like the one I'm going to go later are the practical expression that the government wants to change things. Specifically, I've spoken to these MOD that have said specifically that they're looking into finding ways to leverage their power to the big contractors here to make the contractors more agile, like they're starting to be in the US. And I think it's just going to be a game of getting more and more along this line. But right now, I guess the best ways are to leverage whatever points the companies can directly access. Specifically here, NATO has launched the Diana program. The UK MOD's got DASA, and even if you don't necessarily go for grants within this, by talking to the people there, which is fairly accessible, it's a lot easier to then go up. And then another avenue is us. I just happen to meet some of these folks, and I continue to meet, and I actively look for more. I'm not the only VC, and in America, it's a lot more like that. So through investors, you can of course then go up. Angelo, do you generally negotiate follow-on investment rights and information rights into your syndicates? Well, I mean, it's a fund, right? So we act as a single entity. LPs can come alongside us, and then we create syndicates and to basically create sidecar investments. But there is, once we've made the decision, there is we can be clear with startups. LPs can opt in into increasing, but there is an amount that they've already committed into the fund, and therefore that gives us flexibility. What we normally get depends. We can be very, very early, and in that case, we tend to use safe. That will basically delay the rights that you get into whatever they convert into. If there are a syndicated round coming together, we don't really lead it. Now, we're not one of those that says, come back when you've got a lead. Like I said, we have the option of going earlier, but if the round is forming, it's up to the VC investing. And that's probably the biggest lesson from this year for us. Co-investors matter. Co-investors matter a lot more than what I expected getting into venture. The quality is not even across all the VCs out there. And I'm not going to obviously name names right now, but I would say that I'm becoming a lot more selective about the VCs that I would ideally want. And I'm very open and candid about our founders when they approach the rounds. And in some cases, I have increased the level of scrutiny, nothing to do with the founders. And in some cases, I've said no to rounds that were led by bigger funds, but they were proposing terms that we couldn't push against because we're too small, but they were set in stone. So all of this to say that standard preference seed shares are standard. I don't think they're particularly good or bad. I think they're fairly standard. I don't necessarily mind. If nobody wants them, I'm also happy without. But yeah, generally that's how it happens. Either safe or if there is a larger rounds, we tend to go with standard terms. We absolutely push against anything crap like charging companies. If we're too small to push and the founders don't have leverage to push against fees and weird stuff, and there is not an equalization mechanism, I'd rather not do the deal. If the VC is so powerful and it's such a crappy VC. Sometimes not the harshest terms are the best terms, in my opinion, into the long-term growth, which is how you actually get value. How to recognize real AI first companies? We've got 2 questions, then we're going to stop it there because we're already past the hour. So Thomas and Stefan are going to be the last questions. How to recognize real AI first company versus AI wash type of opportunities? Well, DeepMind was an AI first, and now it's powering Google. OpenAI, even though they leveraged existing research, you could argue that they've become, a company that now people copy, like Mistral and whatever, but they're still having an edge, at least enough to compete with corporates to the size of Google rather than just being acquired. You could argue that Microsoft is taking a big chunk of control there to give the money to fight. But all of this to say, in the first 2 to 3 years, it's probably something that goes against the grain. Again, early versions of OpenAI, nobody knew about them, nobody cared. Actually, we're not in a company, we're an open profit. So there's a lot of research. Same for DeepMind. I remember I wasn't an investor back then, but as an engineer, I was looking into early research of what DeepMind was publishing, and a lot of the press was about, especially in the UK, Financial Times type of things. This company's never going to make any money, whatever, blah, 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 blah. That's the same, right? Look, OpenAI, DeepMind. So for me, it's going to be the same. Somebody's going to take a different type of algorithms that maybe right now don't make perfect sense because of how the data and whatever, but there's going to be conditions and they're going to be able to demonstrate that there is potential, not enough to get the general tech investors to invest, but probably enough to get a bit of a leap of faith. And then it's going to go, maybe 50-50. If it doesn't actually scale, once you start to give it some money and train it, you failed. Otherwise, you succeed. Do you plan to enable the participation of small angels again in the future? Yes, 101%. Now it's even easier because Vauban has been acquired by Carta. We use Vauban for the fund admin, and through the new platform with this integration has created, it's even easier to manage different people. So the onboarding was already straightforward. Actually, it's remained the same, but right now we can be a little bit more flexible. It's still a fund, and so we will still need to ensure that every person that joins is a high net worth or sophisticated investor, and of course do the KYC and AML. But if it's just a matter of, hey, I cannot write the minimum 50K check and you're an angel, we would welcome you. For angels, it's all about the network. For institutions, of course, we stick to our minimum 100K minimum check, which is the official minimum, but that's only if you're an entity rather than an angel. For angels, we just want to build community and bring brains on board.